What happens when the people in power start believing that rules don't apply to them? When the same leaders who are supposed to protect justice and fairness turn around and treat public resources like their own private playground? That's not just a headline, it's a question that cuts to the core of trust, accountability, and whether officials see themselves as servants of the people or as members of an untouchable class. And recently, in a tense Senate hearing, we got a rare glimpse of what happens when someone in Washington decides to push back. Senator Peter Welch confronted FBI Director Kash Patel in a way that pulled back the curtain, not just on perks and jets, but on a deeper issue of fairness.
Believe, and that is that the political violence that is so afflicting our country, it doesn't matter whether it's from the right or the left. I mean, all of us have an obligation to fiercely advocate for our point of view. All of us have an obligation to respect people with whom we disagree. The folks we disagree with are our opponents, but they're not our enemies. And I hope all of us keep that in mind and do the best we can to set that example. I want to congratulate the FBI. I want to congratulate the Utah state and local law enforcement for the very good work that it did in apprehending the violent assailant of Charlie Kirk, and that is a terrible, terrible tragedy. Director Patel, at one point you made an announcement that the suspect was in custody. We got our man. It turned out that was not true. In fact, I think that was about 27 hours before the person now in custody was apprehended. Why did you make that statement?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you letting me address this. What the FBI does is not just locate and find suspects, but we also participate in eliminating subjects. And what we had at the time was a subject in custody in relation to this investigation. So in my commitment to work with the public to help identify subjects and suspects, I put that information out. And then when we interviewed him, I put out the results of that. And could I have been more careful in my verbiage and included an A subject instead of subject? Sure, in the heat of the moment, but I was doing the best I could.
In all candor, I don't quite get that, because if we have our man, that would suggest to the public that everybody can rest and relax and not then continue to provide information to local law enforcement and to you. So that was a mistake.
I don't see it as a mistake. I see it as something working with the public to identify that there was a subject
So if
in
you
custody.
if you put out a statement that says we've got our man, and in fact it turns out that you didn't have your man, that's not a mistake?
But that's not what I said.
Well, I'll go on. That's my understanding. A second thing that is really important in the FBI, but it's important in every agency, is that the folks who are doing good work get supported for the work they're doing. And a number of highly successful FBI agents have been let go, and I want to just ask you a little bit about that. You know who Brian Driscoll is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And my understanding is he served at the FBI for over 18 years. You agree?
I believe that's accurate.
Special agent in charge of the Newark office. He was commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team. That's a very prestigious and responsible position, correct?
It is.
Section chief of the Critical Incident Response Group's tactical section. You've got to be pretty good to get that high responsibility. You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
He oversaw 55 SWAT teams, and they're like the elite of the elite, right? They go in to the dangerous situations, right? He got a Medal of Valor for his participation in a raid on ISIS terrorist Abu Sayyaf, who had kidnapped American citizens Kyla Mueller, right? Mueller? Is that right?
I know.
You're in agreement, right?
I know Kayla Mueller's family, yes. I know this.
Okay, and he got Kurt Meyer, somebody who had barricaded himself in a bar after he killed 4 people and wounded 2. And Driscoll was part of the team that went in there and took that guy out, right?
I don't have all the details, but I'll take your word for it, Senator.
And he got into trouble when Emil Bove demanded a list of FBI agents who investigated January 6th and was apprehensive that what did happen ultimately would happen, and that is those folks would get fired. I mean, do you agree with me that a boss who stands up for his subordinates when they did the job that was asked of them is a stand-up person and somebody to be admired?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
Pardon me?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
But Driscoll got fired, right?
Again, that matter is under litigation, and the matter you referenced occurred before I was
Okay, but
director.
let's just keep it really narrow here. He's fired, right?
Yes, he was terminated.
And he has to be, there's somebody communicates to him that he's terminated, correct?
That's my job.
That's your job. So you communicated to him that he was fired.
I did.
So, you know, I have a hard time with this because that record suggests to me that this person is like worthy of consideration for the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he got fired.
But there's also a record of other information that was available, and now that this matter is pending litigation, we will get that out in due course. But as you can
the
agree.
So-called, so you've got, quote, other information that you see as a valid basis to fire somebody who, from what I can tell, had an absolutely outstanding record and who crossed the threshold of getting in trouble because he was standing up for agents serving under him who did work that was assigned to them that happened to be related to the January 6th uprising.
Again, you're correlating based on your information the reasons for his termination, and I'm telling you.
No, that's right. Let me ask you another question. You know, when you were here, you were rightly critical, not here actually, I guess it was on Cash's corner. You were rightly critical of the way that the previous FBI director used the FBI jet. And you said you wanted to ground Chris Wray's private jet travel that he pays for with taxpayer dollars to hop.
The exchange revealed more than Patel probably intended, and what came out should make every taxpayer stop and think. Because the story isn't about a plane, it's about whether the powerful play by the same rules as everyone else. Welch began not with outrage but with a reminder. He pointed to the rise of political violence in this country, and he said something simple but important: opponents are not enemies. It shouldn't matter if you lean left or right, the duty of leaders is to argue fiercely but respect the humanity of those who disagree. That kind of framing matters because it sets a tone of responsibility. But almost immediately Patel's responses began to paint a different picture, one of defensiveness, spin, and evasion. Welch contrasted the ideal of public service with the reality of how power is being used. And that's when the conversation shifted from unity to something much harder: accountability. The first major clash came over a tragedy. After the horrific attack that left political commentator Charlie Kirk dead, Patel had gone before cameras and announced that the FBI had got our man. Except that wasn't true. The real suspect wasn't apprehended until nearly 30 hours later. To Welch, that misstep wasn't just a slip of the tongue. When a leader tells the public we've got him, it signals safety. It tells citizens to relax, to stop looking for tips, to stand down. But when it turns out to be false, trust evaporates. Welch asked Patel directly, why make that claim? Patel argued he was just trying to communicate, that in the heat of the moment he might have phrased it poorly, but it wasn't a mistake. Welch wasn't buying it. Because to the average person, if someone says we've got our man, and then it turns out they don't, that's a mistake. And it's one that chips away at credibility. The hearing made something clear: Patel didn't want to admit fault, but Welch was focused on a much bigger point. Leadership requires precision. Without credibility, everything else falls apart. And credibility wasn't just an abstract issue in this hearing. It tied directly to one of the most decorated agents the FBI had. Brian Driscoll, 18 years in the Bureau, special agent in charge of Newark, commander of the elite hostage rescue team, a man who oversaw 55 SWAT teams and carried the Medal of Valor for extraordinary bravery during raids against ISIS and domestic threats alike. Welch walked through his record piece by piece. Every detail painted a picture of an agent who was elite, respected, the kind of leader Americans would expect to be celebrated, not discarded. Yet Driscoll was fired. Why? According to Welch, because he resisted pressure to hand over names of agents tied to January 6 investigations, fearing correctly that they would be targeted and punished. Patel admitted it was his job to communicate the termination. When pressed, he leaned on other information that would come out in litigation, but Welch made the contrast sharp. Here was a man worthy of a Presidential Medal of Freedom fired instead, and here was the director defending the process instead of the principal. The signal was unmistakable. In Welch's words, this wasn't just about paperwork, it was about loyalty, fairness, and the willingness to stand by those who did their jobs. If decorated agents could be punished for protecting their subordinates, what message did that send to everyone else in the Bureau? From there, the spotlight shifted to what most viewers would see as the heart of the matter: perks, jets, lavish trips, and taxpayer money. Welch brought receipts. On March 7, an FBI jet flew round-trip from Washington, D.C. to Las Vegas. Patel attended a UFC fight alongside actor Mel Gibson. On April 5, he was at a hockey game in New York City with Wayne Gretzky. On April 12, another UFC fight in Miami. Each trip flown on the FBI's private jet. Each trip taxpayer-funded. Welch asked the obvious question: what's the cost to the taxpayer? Patel tried to defend himself. He claimed Congress mandated his use of the jet, that he personally reimbursed the commercial equivalent. But Welch wasn't letting him dodge. Because the point wasn't just money. The point was optics. Every rank-and-file agent in Washington pays their own way to travel home. Ordinary workers in America save up to buy tickets. Meanwhile, the director was using government planes to rub shoulders with celebrities. Welch's line landed hard. Leadership isn't about perks, it's about responsibility. And when public officials act like VIPs, the public trust takes another hit. While the exchange grew sharper when Welch tied this spending to another issue: community resources. Local law enforcement agencies across the country rely on COPS grants, federal funds that support hiring officers and keeping communities safe. Welch noted that $500 million in those grants had been cut. Vermont towns like Burlington and Rutland were struggling. And yet at the same time, the FBI was reportedly considering acquiring a new jet at a cost of $72 to $80 million. Welch's point was simple: how do you justify slashing local support while shopping for luxury aircraft? Patel insisted the numbers were wrong, promised to provide documents, but the optics were clear. When communities are being told to do more with less, watching top officials demand more jets feels like betrayal. Welch forced the contrast: should taxpayer money go toward keeping neighborhoods safe, or toward flying officials to sports events with celebrities? By this point, the themes of the hearing had crystallized. Accountability versus entitlement, service versus perks, trust versus spin. Welch brought the focus back again and again to the same point. Leadership is about setting an example. If decorated agents are fired while directors get perks, if statements mislead the public, if resources are misallocated, what message is left? Welch reminded Patel, and everyone watching, that public service isn't about being above the rules. It's about being bound by them more than anyone else. Because every time leaders blur those lines, the gap between government and people widens. And that's the bigger story here. It isn't about a single trip or a single statement. It's about the double standards of power. Welch exposed a pattern that viewers everywhere recognize: one set of rules for the powerful, another for everyone else. When ordinary citizens hear that an FBI jet was used for celebrity outings, while communities are told there's no money for cops on the street, it fuels cynicism. When decorated agents are punished while directors defend their perks, it signals that loyalty flows upward, not downward. Welch's questions pierced through the defenses and laid bare the uncomfortable truth. People at the top often forget who they serve. And here's the part that matters most. Welch showed that accountability is possible, that asking tough questions, refusing to accept spin, can force the powerful to squirm. It doesn't happen enough in Washington, but when it does, it reminds us why oversight matters. Because without it, taxpayer money turns into a personal slush fund, and leadership becomes entitlement. Welch's confrontation with Patel was a reminder that accountability isn't about politics, it's about fairness. It's about the idea that no one should be too powerful to answer basic questions. So where does that leave us? With a question we can't ignore: how long will the public accept these double standards? Should officials be allowed to fly government jets to sporting events with celebrities while local officers lose resources? Should decorated agents be punished for protecting their subordinates, while leaders who mislead the public face no consequences? Should the top job in law enforcement come with perks that separate the director from the very agents he commands? Welch forced those questions into the open. Now it's up to the public to decide how much longer this imbalance can continue. Because at the end of the day, accountability isn't about one senator, one director, or one hearing. It's about whether the people demand leaders who treat taxpayer money with respect, whether citizens insist that fairness applies at every level, not just at the bottom. Welch's exchange was uncomfortable, tense and revealing, and it was exactly what needed to happen, because when power is challenged, truth comes to light. So what do you think? Should officials like Patel be allowed to use government jets for personal outings, or should there be strict limits that make sure taxpayer money serves the public, not the privileged few? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want more deep dive breakdowns into moments that reveal what's really going on in Washington, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because stories like this, they matter. And the more we know, the better equipped we are to demand accountability.